All right, I think we are about ready to begin. I want to say good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast who's been attending. We have another great turnout for our latest webinar in the NIMBL lecture series, Buying Time, How CAMS Can Maximize the Strategic Value of Your SAP Investment. I'm Jake Eisbart, part of the marketing team here at NIMBL. A little bit about us. We are SAP technologists and SAP ecosystem thought leaders. Our consulting business, which is 50% of our work, delivers SAP projects, both technical and functional, while our Denver-based SAP managed services, the other 50%, supports both the Fortune 1000 and mid-market 24/7 across 20-plus skill sets. While our projects tend to be technical in nature, HANA, UX, SOLMAN, we likewise provide deliverable-based SAP functional, business, process, and PMO services. Here's a quick list of the services that we offer. Obviously, today we will be discussing CAMS, and here are a list of some of the customers and clients that we've worked with. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We want to be able to answer as many questions as possible. So if you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a word bubble or a chat box. Feel free to ask as many questions as you like, and our presenters will answer them at the end. In addition, everybody will be receiving a fully edited copy of this presentation. So if you miss a slide, don't worry about it. We will be sending you a full copy afterwards. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about our presenter, Leea Manikowski. She is NIMBL's CAMS practice lead. Leea studied marketing and logistics at Central Michigan University. She began her SAP career supporting full lifecycle implementations as a functional consultant, then moving on to test lead for global rollouts, integration manager, and now the AMS account manager to where she is now. Before we begin the presentation, we just want to land quick how experienced people are and what CAMS, the CAMS concept, what it applies to. So we'll give people a little bit of time to fill this out. Are you familiar with the CAMS concept? All right, we'll give people a little bit of time. Great. All right, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Leea. Leea, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending my webinar. I appreciate you taking the time to join me today. I will definitely kind of walk you through a few agenda items that we have here, starting with what is CAMS. I'll also discuss the benefits and risks of using a CAMS provider. I'll explain to you kind of the key takeaways on how to find that proper balance. And I'll also walk you through a CAMS case study where there's been a lot of success for a client lining up with a CAMS partner. So to start, what is CAMS? I believe most of you are familiar with the SAP acronym AMS, which stands for Application Management Services. The CAMS acronym stands for Consultative Application Management Services, which means from a high level, outsourcing your SAP AMS support, or at least to an extent, to a more consultative and strategic partner versus that traditional AMS ticket-taking approach. I'll walk through a bit more of the specifics, but I wanted to follow this up with a couple more definitions just to lay the groundwork. Okay. In my CAMS definition, I mentioned outsourcing. Well, what is outsourcing? In this presentation, the definition of outsource is to obtain a service from an outside supplier in place of an internal resource. Which brings me to the definition of insource, the practice of using an organization's own resources to accomplish a task. So just to kind of give you kind of a silly example to paint a picture for this, let's say a company has a leaking pipe. If that company has a leaking pipe and they happen to be a plumbing company, they may very well likely decide to insource that activity. They have that expertise and those resources in-house already that are already skilled up to accomplish that task. However, if the company with a leaking pipe is a doctor's office, they may choose to outsource. The reason being they likely don't have that skill set and that expertise inside, and there's other more kind of useful items that those individuals within the doctor's office could be doing with their time. Which brings me to a powerful quote. The important thing about outsourcing is that it becomes a very powerful tool to leverage talent, improve productivity, and reduce work cycles. To go back to my previous example, does it really add any value to have a doctor or a nurse or a surgeon trying to fix a plumbing issue when he or she could be performing open heart surgery or diagnosing a sick patient? Where is their time best spent? Let me talk to the doctor's office metaphor just one step further, and then I'll kind of jump into the key differentiators here. But let's just say you go to that doctor's office. You have a stomach ache. You'll likely meet with a nurse who will provide you kind of a quick solution and help you feel better right away. However, you're likely going to want to know kind of what caused your stomach ache. Why do you feel sick? Was it food poisoning? Was it an allergy? You're going to want this detail to make sure you don't do whatever it was that caused the stomach ache. You might have that nurse consult with her team. Maybe he or she needs to take some tests and send it to a lab, or potentially bring in a doctor. So this leads me to kind of the differentiators here between CAMS and AMS. A good CAMS provider will find problems before they exist. They'll work with you to foster a mutually beneficial long-term partnership, and they'll build relationships with your team to offer the best support model. They'll also want to help you optimize your existing SAP investment. A pretty cool example that I've seen with this particular item is I was with a client in the last couple of years, and during the initial kind of transition to assist that client, one of the CAMS consultants was walking through financial month-end processes with a business user. The consultant noticed that the business user was exporting items from SAP and manually manipulating the data to get the information they needed to provide month-end reporting. That CAMS consultant said, hey, wait a minute, this activity can be done in a standard SAP report, and you guys already actually have that you already have that investment. On the spot, that CAMS resource showed that business user. They brought them to the T code. They walked them through the report. They did a real-life example. It was a really cool thing to kind of see that initial relationship building from day one. So a couple other differentiators are you'll have the opportunity to work with experts to ensure you're looking at the best solutions for your business and the place that your business is in. And you'll also be kept in the loop on those latest technologies, probably whether you like to or not. They'll keep you updated with the latest and the greatest and consult you on what makes sense for your company.
All right, we're going to follow that up with another poll question. Based on what you heard or your experience obviously with your company, are you currently considering a CAMS provider? And we'll give people a little bit of time to fill that out. Looks like it's running around 50-50. Great. So a follow-up to that is, if yes, you are considering a CAMS provider, what's your current timeline? Are you looking to do it in less than a year? Is it going to be 1 to 2 years, 2 to 4 years, or you are not sure? And again, we'll give people a little bit of time. All right, looks like all the responses are in. I'm going to hand it back over to Leea.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the benefits and risks of using a CAMS provider. One of the benefits of using a CAMS provider is to keep your business on track. As you are all aware of, I'm sure you know that the constant evolution within business and technology is ever evolving. A good CAMS provider can help you determine which technologies would apply to you, maybe which ones to completely avoid, and possibly some places in between. An example I like to use here are enhancement pack releases. Obviously, there are lots of releases, enhancement pack releases that come through SAP. There might be various reasons that your business may or may not consider implementing these enhancement pack releases. A CAMS provider can kind of walk you through and determine what the reason is that you may want to apply this enhancement pack, why you might be able to avoid it, and kind of guide you along that path. That way you're not using your resources on things that aren't adding the proper amount of value. There's also an ever-evolving change in regulations that may impact your business. A CAMS provider can keep the system updated to reflect the latest requirements to help avoid those time-consuming and painful infractions. There's also always ever-changing user requirements and the continuance of new technology and innovations. A CAMS provider has access to industry experts regarding new innovations and how they can help business or how they may not be the best path ahead for you or your team. Finally, on top of all this, you're expected typically by your company, maybe your boss, to continually improve your team, your technology, your processes, etc. This is difficult, obviously, with all of the tasks that you have kind of moving around and coming your way. A good CAMS provider will hold themselves accountable for these continual improvement items and measure and share those results with you. Which takes me to supplementing your team and built-in flexibility. Building in that supplement to your team helps your team have the ability to focus on more strategic endeavors. An example that I witnessed was I saw a global ERP manager who was tackling password resets and user creations. Obviously, her time might be spent better elsewhere, and when it was decided to partner with that CAMS provider, she was able to focus on global IT strategy for that company and was able to hand over those break fix and kind of mundane password reset activities and focus her valuable time elsewhere. There is also an opportunity to remove internal team members from painful support requirements. Meaning sometimes there's off-hour support for production system, maintenance as an example. Also severity issues often happen, Friday night, 9 p.m., 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. So having that partner kind of help ease that pain with your team can be very helpful in just reducing risk of losing critical teammates. Also, if a company has limited resources, a CAMS partner will supplement your existing team by adding full, partial, and or specific skill sets that you may need support in. It can be very custom based on your needs, which is kind of a cool option. And then building in flexibility for your team. As I kind of mentioned in the last bullet, it can be very cost effective because you can obtain a discounted rate for a bundle of services and expertise instead of hiring individuals for each specific skill set to fill that role within your company. It also can help the increases and decreases of capacity as your company has that need. And then there's an ability to scale. When you have that CAMS provider, they work with your team day to day. They know your business. They have a lot of documentation on your company, and they have a certain level of resources within the company that are familiar with your account just to be able to seamlessly support. So you'll also have access to those resources in the if you need to scale up on short notice. Finally, a CAMS provider can ease uncertainties. Supply and demand is constantly changing. A provider can ebb and flow with the needs of their client. There could also be a change in management, which could lead to changing expectations for your team or department. A partner also comes with built-in awareness of software risks. What is the minimum threshold, advisable or available? What are the gotchas when you're implementing new software and the lessons learned? Maybe the best scenario for you is not the same as the rest of your industry. A good CAMS provider can help guide you with those difficult decisions based on extensive experience in your industry, as well as that intimate knowledge of your company. Obviously with the benefits, there are always risks to working with an outside provider. As you delegate tasks or possibly even outsource your entire SAP team, you may feel or just the losing of that control kind of may be a risk for you. There are definitely a variety of ways to mitigate that loss of control, and 2 examples could be to, one, you could limit the outsourcing of the technical types of tasks and keep those strategic tasks in-house. I've seen a lot of examples where an a CAMS provider supports the technical side of a company and they work with their functional resources. There's also opportunity to put in place proper controls, checks and balances, make sure functional specs are signed off on, certain rigorous processes that CAMS providers typically to be drawn to or at least recommend anyway. So there's a lot of items there to kind of mitigate that risk. You may also fear a risk of reduced quality. Because of the mutually beneficial partnership, CAMS providers are very conscious of their results and they want to build that long-standing relationship. Some examples I've seen to help kind of regulate those results with their team are quarterly customer satisfaction surveys where they just send you a short survey. Are you happy? Is the quality there? It could be a variety of questions, of course. I've also seen quarterly on-site reviews where the client and the CAMS provider sit together and kind of discuss where could they improve, what's going well, and then also obviously talk about things in the future. Also, it can feel risky investing in non-company resources, which is very true, but you have to remember you're investing in a strategy that is customized and customizable for future to best fit your needs. This will also help to reduce the risk of that initial large financial investment. And finally, you may fear that having a CAMS partner will be more time consuming, whether it's ongoing or the initial transition for your team and yourself. And although that initial transition will require a large investment of time, a good CAMS provider will have mastered this transition and will aim to take on as much burden as possible to relieve the client and support the long-standing partnership that they are seeking.
All right, we're going to jump to another poll question. If you are currently using CAMS or AMS and you have a provider as such, what are the biggest pain points? Is it the response time? Is there a language barrier or other complications due to it being offshore? Is it the overall cost? Or in general, is it the expertise or experience level of the provider? We'll give people a little bit of time to fill that out. All right, looks like we have all the answers in. I'm going to hand it back over to Leea.
All right. Well, before I help offer you key decisions to finding that proper balance of support, and quite possibly the reason that you're in this webinar, I'd like to begin with a very powerful quote. Time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time. Rarely have I ever witnessed a company that has an excess of time and resources time. Working to find the proper outsourcing strategy can help immensely with the management and optimization of a company's time and resources. So first, let me start with the options when seeking external support. You have your in-house, of course, where you have your current team that you can aim to skill up, or possibly they already have the skill set within. You can also add new hires to your team. Then you have your external consultants. You could be looking at a global consulting company potentially. Also, you could be looking at a local company right down the street. There might be also options kind of in the middle that have the local and the global coverage. You can also seek independent contractors. I've often seen these used for shorter term, but I've also seen them used for a longer term sourcing strategy in certain cases. And likely the approach that you will settle on is going to be kind of a combination of all of the above with the internal and external resource support. So to be successful in developing a sourcing strategy, you must take time to put forth the due diligence in understanding the following. What is the reason you're seeking this option? Do you have issues with an existing provider? Common examples I've heard of are providers not necessarily finding the root cause of an issue. They'll often fix the ticket, close it out. Because of SLAs, they want to just close those tickets, send them back over, and they're not necessarily finding the root cause and fixing the future recurrence of tickets. So that's definitely been a common kind of complaint that I've seen. Also, I've heard of a lot of complaints with language barriers. If they're working potentially with maybe an AMS provider and it's a global company and their resources are possibly in another country, they could have difficulty understanding them over the phone, as well as kind of time zones can sometimes impact the resolution time on tickets, which is probably the third most common complaint that I have is it takes 2 days to work on a simple task, which can be painful for a company. Other things you'll also need to know is if your current employees are overworked, maybe underworked. If they are overworked, are you at risk of losing key team players? Also, are you seeking long-term support? Are you seeking short-term support? Are you looking for strategic guidance or just the relief of your current team? A simple strategy to identify opportunities and needs is to create a list of those positions and associated tasks that are in place that can be run more effectively or efficiently. So an example of this that I did witness is a company was seeking a partner to help take some burden off of one of their internal employees who was very highly valued. That employee was a BW resource and he was asked to support all BW activities. However, this company also had retail locations that they supported with these BW jobs, and they ran from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single hour, every single day of the week. So although this was a valued employee from a strategic standpoint, he was spending a lot of time dealing with these issues that would happen on these reports at 5 a.m. or on a Saturday. So the issue here that I see is one is this valued resource who has intimate knowledge of the business who should be working on strategic matters. He's kind of getting pulled off and distracted by these minor report issues that could be very likely technically, basically a technical monitoring automation could have been set up, but this resource didn't necessarily have the time or the expertise to tackle that. So using, in this very specific case, using a provider could be very helpful in this instance. All right. And most importantly, it's important to understand your internal resource capabilities. What are they capable of, and do they have the bandwidth to take more on? Is your team new to SAP, or are they well-versed? If your team's been supporting SAP for years, it's very likely going to make sense to insource some of those certain functions. And as you'll see in a few slides, likely the more strategic or high operational importance tasks would make more sense. Also, do you need specialized expertise? And is it cost effective to build it within? Does it make sense to train somebody who's qualified within your company? Or would it be easier to insource a 1/4 full FTE to support that activity? Also, what are your current gaps, and what is the most sensible approach to address those gaps? To dive into finding the proper balance a bit deeper, I have a graphic you may be familiar with. And to help me explain, let me talk through a couple examples. An item with high operational importance and low strategic importance will likely want to be outsourced. A very basic example here could be a daily health check. Obviously, from a strategic standpoint, a daily health check is very insignificant. However, if that daily health check catches a production issue before it happens, obviously it's very operationally important. An item with low operational importance and low strategic importance may make sense to insource. The reason I say this is you'll want to determine if the value is there with the costs that you're incurring. So a specific example of this would be SAP user creation. It's not a very challenging task. Do you want your team spending their resources on doing it, or does it make more sense for an outside provider? Does it make sense to pay them to do that task? That's one that you'll have to kind of weigh and balance. Also, let me talk to one more example. An item with high strategic importance and high operational importance will likely be wise to insource, as I kind of touched on briefly earlier. The reason is strategically important tasks are often sources of competitive advantage for a company. Also, if the task has a high impact on operational performance, it can contribute greatly to the smooth running of the organization, or if it's done poorly, it could greatly disrupt it. So that's why we say it might be wise to keep that task in-house. And finally, you will need to ask yourself some key questions to begin some structure, to begin to build that structure around your sourcing strategy and to validate that it is worth your time, because it can be quite time consuming. Before you begin, you'll want to ask yourself and your team, will the sourcing model meet current and future growth expectations? What is that impact to the business? Does the strategy satisfy future needs? Does your team have the skills and bandwidth to implement and manage the new strategy? Do you risk losing key people from your team because of the strategy? And is your organization on board? So if some of those questions, if you've satisfied those questions and you feel good with the support kind of from your team and where you stand, you can begin to build your sourcing strategy. To start, you'll want to identify and analyze the options. What is the background and why is this decision surfacing now? What's the time frame and what is the context of this action? Where are the internal capabilities that we discussed in previous slides? Do you have that list handy? What are your constraints? A very common constraint could be your budget, or perhaps your remote location. Maybe you're located in a very remote area and it's difficult to find that IT talent that you so badly need. Also, what are your gaps today and what are your gaps tomorrow? How do these match up to your proposed solution? And another thing to consider is what external conditions could be impactful to your strategy. What's happening with your market, and what about the business climate? An example, a specific example that could be something to consider is when you're looking for a CAMS provider. What's their stability? Are they a brand new startup? Have they been around for 10 years? Potentially they could be approaching bankruptcy. That might be something that you'll want to consider as you're kind of evaluating the different options. Also, while you're doing this analysis, you'll uncover other risks. Maybe your rigorous processes are kind of complicating things. Or perhaps you feel a risk of handing over access to a vendor. Finally, what is the total cost and what are the expectations? Depending on the structure you choose, both costs and expectations will vary greatly. An example of this is you may choose to outsource only the technical side of your AMS support team. With this, costs and expectations will vary greatly whether you go with independent contractors, whether you go with domestic AMS, or potentially global sourcing. Once you address some of these difficult questions, you can begin to create and execute a business case. What is the value you'll be gaining? Is it strategic guidance from experts in the industry, or maybe freeing up those internal overworked resources to be more strategic? What are the measurable benefits that are important to your company? Perhaps it is that reduced cost. And in your strategy, how will this look in the first year? You may not see that reduced cost necessarily in year 1, but will it show in year 3? What will it look like in year 10? Be sure your scope is specific and defined. However, the reality is you'll likely learn more along the way as you're making these evaluations. So be prepared for that. Next, you'll be able to begin the execution. You'll want to make sure to define deliverable ownership and expectation. Perhaps you're only outsourcing the technical items. Who will own the functional specifications, and how will that interaction happen? Which leads to creating the team, the processes, and the controls to support. Once you have all that in place, you're not done there. You'll want to repeat. And what I mean by this is it's critical to constantly kind of reevaluate your support structure and repeat this evaluation because what fits today may not necessarily fit for your company in a year. Now that you have your strategy defined, at least for the time being, you'll need to find a partner to support this strategy. First, you'll want to know what is their ability to support your SAP needs. Do they cover all the modules that you have in the scope of what's needed in your support? Do they have the languages that you need that support to be covered in? Possibly it's a time zone issue. You'll want to think of all these requirements up front when you're evaluating that partner. Also, how well equipped are they to ebb and flow with your needs, and how flexible are they? An example is maybe if you're a large company, it may be better to have a larger CAMS provider who's more capable of fitting when needed to scale last minute. Also, can this provider offer proactive support to reduce break-fix issues? You don't want to see those same issues surfacing and happening over and over and not addressing that root cause. And also, enhancement options to maximize your investment. Are they flexible on your needs and processes? I've seen examples where providers have very rigorous ticket systems and make it very difficult for clients to kind of customize it in the way that they need. So I've also seen instances where a CAMS provider is very flexible, where they either choose to monitor their system or they use their own in-house system for that client to support and eat the cost on that ticketing system for the client, or where they dually maintain tickets within their system as well as the client system. Finally, check their references. You're always going to get the real story from a company's references, no matter how well groomed they may be. They will share the reality of what's being sold to you and how that provider really is partnering up with them. Which brings me to a success story of a CAMS case study. In this particular example, it is a dynamite manufacturer. Their industry is oil and energy. Their annual revenue is around $200 million. They have locations in the US, Colorado, and Texas, as well as Germany and Canada. They have 420 employees approximately, and they have both technical and functional support needs. Which brings us to why. Why was this company a prime candidate, you may ask? Well, this company was actively seeking strategic guidance for today and for future needs. Although they had a very talented staff internally, they were not experts in the areas that could be a competitive advantage for them. They lacked that internal SAP-specific expertise, and they didn't have enough resources to support that. So they may have had one or two internal SAP persons that were very, very well versed, but that simply wasn't enough to support their needs. They also needed support in multiple languages. They needed somebody to be able to support in English as well as German, and across several time zones. Obviously, you have Canada and Texas and Germany. So there's a wide array of hours that need to be available to support. They also need coverage over 10 SAP skill sets, technical and functional. That's roughly 90% of their SAP team now. So in this particular instance, it was very much more cost effective to work with a CAMS provider than to somehow hire or skill up internal resources to support that need. They were also looking for a partner that could provide not only break-fix task and not only partner with them, but they also wanted to be able to access that provider to assist with certain small projects, large projects. That way they kind of had that one-stop shop and didn't have to go through this evaluation process every time they needed a project tackled. In the end, their goal was to leverage their internal talent to work toward business strategy instead of kind of supporting that SAP support function, which is what they accomplished. So before I leave you today, I just wanted to share with you a few tips from my experience. Give your strategy time to work. There's definitely going to be changes that create challenges along the way, and it's going to continue to evolve as that strategy changes and matures. So please be patient. Do the work up front to limit the execution issues and communicate to your team along the way to gain their inputs and support. If you involve your team members, they will definitely help you fine-tune that process, bring things to your attention you may not have considered, and also feel involved and want to help this process or this strategy get bought off on by your company. You also want to fully understand the objectives and communicate clear expectations, not only to your team, but also to that CAMS partner. So with time and with the right partner, your strategy will mature into a seamless extension of your IT team, which I believe is always the end goal. So I'd like to thank you again for your valuable time. I hope you found something helpful to take away from this webinar, and good luck on your CAMS journey if that is the path ahead. Thank you very much.
All right, I want to say thank you to Leea. We have some questions from you that we're going to get to right now. Again, as I mentioned before, everybody who attended will be receiving a fully edited copy. And after all the Q&A is over, definitely feel free to fill out the comment section, because we'd like to know what you thought about the presentation, what you think we missed out on, and as far as subject matter, what you would like our lecture series to explore in the future. So let's get to our first question from Daniel. Daniel writes, you mentioned a quote-unquote mutually beneficial relationship. Could you expand on that?
Sure. Good question. I believe I mentioned that once or twice in the presentation. And what I mean by that is typically you want these CAMS providers to be these long-term relationships, because the longer term they are, the more intimately involved they get in your business. And there's also often longer contracts. I've typically seen 1 to 3 year. So for a CAMS provider, this is recurring revenue, which is great for them. And also it's easier to keep customers happy than it is to obviously find new clients to partner with. But an example, a very specific example is I've seen a client have a skill set that they don't currently have coverage for. It might be a new skill set to their team, and they had asked the CAMS provider if they could add that skill set to their internal, to add the skill set to the CAMS provider's expertise, so that way they didn't have to go outside of their company or outside of their CAMS provider, and they could bring that into that existing contract. So that's an example kind of how both are winning. The client's getting that support that they need, and the CAMS provider's growing as a company by adding that kind of expertise and skill set based on that need from their client.
All right, great, thank you. We have another question from Sharon. Sharon asks, in your experience, what's the main difference between offshore and onshore help? Is it just cost?
Well, cost is typically the most notable difference, at least in my experience in working with different clients. Definitely the most desirable difference there. However, there are other areas. For example, you'll be working with somebody likely that has a different primary language. So there could be a language barrier. You're working with somebody who's out of the country, so their time zones could be an impact, which could cause longer turnaround on tickets potentially. However, if cost is a big issue for you, then that could be a good path to take if you have the flexibility in regard to some of those other more challenging areas.
All right, and we have another question. This one's from Linda. Linda asks, is there an employee threshold number, i.e., when should you start considering bringing in an AMS partner?
Well, I would say the short answer is no. And then just to add a little flavor on that, even the smallest IT companies using SAP, they may need potentially just a quarter FTE to support them in a very specific specialized process that they don't want to bring in-house. Also, I mean, a very large company seeking kind of just that external support and guidance, something they may want to consider is seeking a provider with proper capabilities as far as size to be able to support them. So I've definitely seen a wide scale of different size company using outsourcing in their benefit.
All right, it looks like that wraps up the questions. Again, we want to thank everybody for attending. Definitely thank you, Leea, for a great presentation. And as I mentioned before, on your way out, please let us know what you thought. And if you have any further questions about CAMS, the information to contact Leea is on the screen. And we'll be sending you that slide along with the fully edited presentation. So again, thank you very much, Leea, and thank you everybody for attending. Look forward to future webinars, and have a great weekend.